Good evening, Terry.
I own a motel not too far from here, and you'd be welcome to spend the night in one of the empty rooms if you'd like.
It burns! Oh, it burns! And I'm the devil.
And now it's time to walk down Brian's dark alley.
Yeah. Got him now.
And thank you for joining us on the Necronomicast and walking down Brian's dark alley. Man, I've got the pleasure to have with us tonight Mr. Mark Borchardt. Yes, that Mark Borchardt. You've seen him on screen. You've seen him on television. He is an actor. He's a filmmaker. He's a writer. And we're talking to him. Mark, are you out there in Wisconsin now?
Brian, you're too kind. Yes, absolutely. We are talking from the great city of Milwaukee and the great state of Wisconsin. You are absolutely correct.
Beautiful. Well, I'm calling you from Omaha. Just wanted to establish that you're not like off in Japan or something like that, off filming, like Modus Operandi 2 or something like that.
Absolutely. Well, Omaha, we're now in the vast catacombs of the deep, dark night. And, if I would gaze westward and quite a distance beyond the horizon, I would encounter Omaha and the vast plains at the beginning of Nebraska. So this is a very exciting geography that you are inhabiting, and I'm very glad to be talking to you tonight.
Well, that's great. Mark, what we like to do on the Necronomicast occasionally is interview those people out there who share kind of an interest in horror movies and dark cinema, the interest that we have. And I came across you back in the early 2000s, probably late 90s, when you made a film called Coven. You're an independent filmmaker, and you wrote it and you directed it and starred in it and just put the whole thing together. And I know that wasn't your first foray into movie making. Can you talk to just a little bit to get people up to speed about how you maybe grew up and what attracted you to horror movies?
Sure. I got interested in films and filmmaking at the age of 14. I was never into movies. I didn't really go or anything like that. And I came into film through reading film books and looking at the stills, the very dramatic black and white pictures that were in those books. And I would kind of, in my imagination, concoct what possibly could these films be about based upon these very striking photographs. Now, I also, when I was 14, which was in 1980, this was now the height of the slasher area that was begun with Halloween in 78. Now, I was too young to go see Halloween in 78, but by the time my interest in films began in the summer of 1980, well, that was high season for all these horror films. Or being a teenager and so forth, it was part of the trend. It was part of the zeitgeist at the time, and the horror films lasted. That particular huge spell from 78 lasted into the mid-80s until they began to implode, and they became more like parodies. I mean, a very impactful event can only sustain itself for so long before gravity takes it back down. So there was no, except when you're looking at the Universal horror films of the 30s, which Frankenstein had a huge impact and 31 horrified people, and that same year Dracula came out, and Universal had a spell of those, including like the Invisible Man and the Wolf Man. So that was that particular era was a high era for horror, and then in the 70s, beginning in 78, was Halloween. I'll get back to myself personally, but also you can look back in the 73 and 74 when The Exorcist was playing, and that was a huge event, but it didn't start any trend in horror such as Halloween it had done. Now, so my attraction. I wasn't really into horror films, but when I encountered Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, which had nothing to do with slasher films, nor had it anything to do with that trend, I was completely blown away. Night of the Living Dead is an art film. Ingmar Bergman, I'm sure, would immediately recognize it as quite a substantial film, and I consider it a masterpiece just as alongside any Bergman films such as Persona and Hour of the Wolf and Seventh Seal and Shame and The Passion of Anna, Scenes from Marriage, etc., etc. I mean, Night of the Living Dead is pure cinema. What's interesting about Night of the Living Dead is that, it was obviously made by George Romero, and he was in a advertising outfit. They shot commercials back in Pittsburgh, the Leighton Image Company, and so he was very aware of quick editing because he had to get these spots done, cram them into a 30-second spot. And Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead are quite reflective of that editing style, that montage of momentum, which most films don't have. They have a far more casual pace. So Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead were just incredible to me. And not only that, with the low budget, they had to wear regular street clothes and shoot in regular locations, which was a very a point of a diverting point from Hollywood films where they had artificial lighting, artificial costumes, artificial interiors, artificial dialogue, etc., etc. And these films came off as fairly grounded in reality and had a huge impact on me. So I began filmmaking in 1980, same time that I began going to film seriously. And I also want to mention, too, as an aside, that I was never into video games or comic books or horror movies or anything like that. When I was 14, 15, 16, I went to the films to see SOB and Absence of Malice and The Verdict. I was just basically Raising Bull. I was just basically interested in adult films. So a lot of films that people have seen, I'm like, oh man, I just never was a kid like that. It was like adult all the way, because I remember when I was about 10 years old reading H.G. Wells and War of the Worlds and First Men in the Moon and Robert Louis Stevenson, Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, more of these Victorian works. But to get back to the filmmaking aspect, so I picked up the Super 8 camera in 1980, made my first horror film in 1980. The more the scarier, and I edited it in camera because I didn't have an editing machine at the time, so I was very cautious and judicious about what I would shoot and make sure that the entire film could, from beginning to end, happen within 3 minutes and 20 seconds of a solid 50-foot roll.
And so
I've spoken enough, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, a star is born with the more the scarier. So that was your first.
Right.
That was your first foray into motion picture making. That's when you're talking. I loved listening to, because it kind of, you're just a couple years older than me, and about the same age as some of the guys on the show. And so I was kind of thinking back to some of our past interviews with other people, and everybody goes back to those 1930 movies, and they go back to things like The Exorcist, and they go back to things like Halloween, because those were just not meant, and Night of the Living Dead. Those were just great movies, like the low budget Halloween, made for pennies on the dollar, and it's still shocking today. Night of the Living Dead, not only groundbreaking in the way it was filmed, but even with social commentary. I mean, the hero was an African-American man, and that was not commonplace back in the 60s. The Exorcist, certainly groundbreaking, controversial, people passing out in the aisles. So when you're saying these things, and a little aside into, I used to make these little funny movies. Not saying that yours were funny. I'm just saying for me, these were kind of funny movies. But we had not a Super 8. Fisher Price at the time made a camera, and the media that you recorded on was actually an audio tape, and it made a kind of a pixelated, granular, black and white mono-track movie. And so my friend Paul and I, we made movies called The Slim Reaper. We made movies, kind of spoofs of Faces of Death, because that was the bootleg of when I was in junior high. So we've got kind of like you and I kind of lived in a parallel universe, you in Wisconsin and me and my friends in Nebraska. So you're making movies with the 8mm, and then your interest, I guess, grew and your skills grew because I came upon Coven back when you were selling them on VHS tape, and I'm holding in my hand the tape that I bought from you. It was signed by you in 2000. So I really enjoyed that direct-to-video black and white movie that you wrote, edited, directed. You just pretty much did the whole thing.
Dave.
So,
well, thank you, Brian, for picking it up. And I just want to clarify, though, that when you say direct to, it's not direct to video. It was shot on 16 millimeter. There's prints of it. Obviously it was sold on VHS,
okay,
but it was shot on film on 16 millimeter. And thank you for picking it up too, Brian. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's signed by you. It's number 3784. So.
Oh wow! Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I really enjoy it to this day. I look at independent filmmakers doing their projects and their art, and it reminds me a lot. And there's a parallel. A lot of the guys on the show, we are all musicians, and so I really enjoy watching independent films and watching guys do things along that route, because it reminds me so much of a musician, booking his own studio time, writing his own songs, getting anybody to play on his album that he can, and then putting out a product for mass consumption. So there's a lot of parallels between the music world and indie filmmaking. Can you talk a little bit about the making of Coven, like even the technical stuff, because it's really it's a really good-looking film. I really like the saturation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make a couple points. When I brought up Dracula and Frankenstein in 31, the reason why I brought that up was it was a galvanizing effect that there was like a centrifugal force of horror. But that's not my early reference point. My earlier reference point would be like Nosferatu from 22 and Phantom of the Opera and the Golem and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and even more importantly is like F.W. Murnau's Frost and stuff like that. And you can even throw in Haxan and that in there. But none of that created a trend like the Universal film did. And also when you mentioned The Exorcist, or when I did, but as for initial shock, we can back up to 67, 68 for Rosemary's Baby, when they were decrying religion on screen, and that probably shocked the heck out of people. So
absolutely,
The Exorcist was predated by Rosemary's Baby in forms of not as morally shocking, but add moral shock to it that wasn't seen on mainstream screens before.
Yeah, you can throw in the Omen series too. Sure.
Well, that's 76, and that would then that comes a few years after few years after The Exorcist.
Yeah, you know your stuff, man.
But that rode the demonic affair, milieu as did Rosemary's Baby in The Exorcist. So that was by that point, it was nothing new under the sun. But speaking now of Coven, first of all, I never made parodies. I've no, and it's not to offend anybody or anything. I've never been interested. All my films have been straight. I've never considered parodies. I've never considered copying someone or anything like that. It's never occurred to me to do something like that, and it's always tried never to participate in something like that. It's almost like against my religion, my cinematic religion, I guess. And that, but Brian, that's no offense to anyone, because we're all, we're all different. We all have to. We're made different. But to move on to Coven, man, I was interested in drawing a metaphor for the Coven of Witches would be a metaphor for like group meetings, and I felt that group meetings were more interested in getting new blood than curing you of your addiction,
Mm-hmm.
And with Coven, that was kind of like the grand metaphor of how people's help is kind of really insidious, that there's something underneath that is dark and malevolent, and that your addiction is just a vehicle for them to attract you and draw new blood in their circle. And the protagonist, Coven, Mike, is kind of aware of that schematic, that latent schematic that soon emerges to the surface. So that was I probably would have real little intellectual interest in doing a horror film if there wasn't an analog to real life. So in Coven, it holds that to be true. It was shot on 16 millimeter with black and white reversals. I didn't use negative film. I purchased the film and got it developed at the university. Uh-huh. So shooting it on reversal, there was no intermediate or anything like that. Just a work print off the reversal. And the university afforded me equipment. I went to work in the equipment room, so I got lights, I got a tripod, I got sound recorders, additional cameras if I needed them, and so on and so forth. And I shot it I started writing it at the end of 93, started shooting in probably May 94, and Coven was finished the same day that it premiered at the Times Cinema in Milwaukee on June 12th, 1997.
So you finished it, and then we got to get it to the theater on time. We got to get you to the church on time.
Yeah, the very same day. So what we had to do is we had A and B rolls. If they didn't come out perfect and in sync, and the optical print, it would have been really something. I mean, but the forces that be were on our side, and we got the film probably, I think, developed that day or so on and so forth. And however it worked out, it worked out.
Yeah, that's just like drawing it back to musicianship. It's like you got the album release party, and then you're waiting for the UPS man to bring the album to your door so you can sell it that night at the CD release show. Well, it's great.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, it's really, man, down to the wire. And I dig the score to it too, man. Did you have much, just speaking from the musician side, did you have much input into the score, or did you kind of share your vision of the film with the composer and just let him go, or how much input did you have on the score?
Well, the composer was Patrick Nettesheim, and a really, really, talented musician and guy with a very, really good attitude and a very workable persona. He had actually did music and mixed one of my first radio dramas that was broadcast on radio, and we were on the same page. He went ahead, and I think it's an interesting anecdote. The way I remember it is, I'm not much of a night bird, and I swear it was like a Sunday night. And all of a sudden I get this call and say, "Hey, I got the music done for Coven. Let's put it in." I said, "Okay, cool." And he meant that night. So it was, as I remembered, I had to go down there that night and play the film for him, and he played the music along with the film. And I was blown away because there is a certain language related to film and sound and relating to film and music, and I will be damned if he intuitively understood the rhythm of film sound and film silence, and I was just blown away. He just had that natural instinct, that connection to know when a scene needed music and when it didn't. And it was kind of like, films are so typical because I'll get to this. So I was completely blown away that he had completely scored the film and understand the cinematic value of scene to music ratio, which it was just mind blowing. And not everyone can do that. I mean, either you got the beat or you don't, and he certainly did. And I just want to digress for a second. I don't really see populist proletariat films. I don't go to the movies. I've never had really an interest in doing that. I'll see films, but I have no interest in entertainment. Life is entertaining enough in itself. But when I do go to see conventional narratives, my subconscious begins to freak out because I could just feel the rhythm of the film hundreds of times. Each film, the music, the bombastic music, and then the sudden silence, and then the build up again, and it's like macaroni and cheese each day. It's great once in a while, but then every day you go nuts. So I see films differently than most people. I mean, I actually feel the rhythm of them, and that's why I try to stay away from too many conventional narratives. My psyche just can't take it.
Sure. When you were talking about your connection to the music in the film, and when you were you had the initial reaction, I heard these stories that when John Carpenter was working on Halloween and he was working on the dailies and people reviewing them and they're the investors and everybody, they're getting real nervous until because he didn't have the soundtrack in, and so when the music was added in, boom, everything started to click. And I imagine that's probably you think movies that are totally enhanced. Sometimes like a soundtrack to a movie is background noise, because sometimes it just doesn't work or it's distracting. But you think of something like Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece, with that score, it's as iconic as the movie itself. The same thing with Jaws, John Williams. So when you had that initial reaction to hearing the score to your movie the first time, I totally dig what you say there, man, because it just takes me back to other directors and other people reacting when they see the macaroni and the cheese when they get that together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now,
and I want to point out, and Brian, I'm sorry I did for interrupting. I just want to point out too that I believe that actually there's going to be a vinyl album of Coven coming out, from what I understand.
Is that right?
Just so you're aware of that.
Oh my gosh! Well,
I believe so.
We'll certainly hype that one. We'll certainly put a link up on our Facebook page and all that kind of stuff. Now, so Coven, Coven, boom, it's out. You've got the movie out and about, and then through one series of events or another, you're popping up all over. And in preparation for this, I've been aware of you for a long time, but preparation of this interview, I checked out my streaming device, and you are in a film, Modus Operandi, and also Hagstone Demon, which are streaming on, depending on whatever you subscribe to, Amazon, your Netflix. And I checked them both out, and so now you're, well, I don't mean to say just now, but it seems like you are kind of busy in front of the camera rather than behind it. Are you doing a lot of acting, or do you want to talk about your experiences with those movies that I just brought up, or anything else?
Yeah, well,
because I enjoyed both of them. I enjoyed both of them, so I just wanted, I didn't know if you had some, some insight into. With Coven, you're the writer, you're the director, you're kind of the man in charge, and now you are being directed. You are reading scripted lines, or maybe you have some collaboration with the writer. But in other words, you are now part of a project rather than the man behind the wheel of a project. And so I didn't know if you've got any insight that you can glean from that for our listeners.
Oh yeah, first of all, I'd be like, oh, thank God I'm not the director or anything like that, because I'll tell you, in making a film, it's a nightmare. I mean, it's really something out of this world. I've worked with a lot of good people. I mean, there's so many. Anyone who's made a film, I mean, with equipment, with cobbling together money, with dealing with transportation and people and this and all kinds of stuff, that to be in front of a camera as an actor is a breeze. It's a Sunday walk in the park. It's making a film. It's like you have to really, especially when you get older, you have to think, what is the actual value in this, because it's going to press you to the ultimate limits. If you have a regular job, you work within an institutional framework, and there's a whole hierarchy of not of possibilities, but just a hierarchy of systems. When you're going to get the work, when you're punching the time card, you're going to be supervised. There's going to be colleagues there. It's this whole institutional framework. When you do a film, it's everything just relies on you and your stamina and the dexterity of your psychology, and you're just going to be basically reduced to tears is what it's going to be, and then you have to ask yourself, is this really worth it? So when you
I just imagine there's just so much. When not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but I was just thinking, like, there's got to be so much self introspection during the whole time too when you're doing something like that. Like, I don't know if maybe self-judging or something like that maybe is the wrong way to put it, but you're always constantly maybe reviewing or discerning what you're doing, and if you're putting people in the right spot. And sorry to interrupt. You just struck.
No, not at all, Brian. I'll tell you, when you're making a film at that point, all you're doing is just trying to survive. All of that stuff, when people psychoanalyze films, it's all crap. It's all, it's not real. I'll tell you, just like like take somebody for Bergman, for instance, and people psychoanalyze his films, and he'll say that, well, that's all crap because I didn't intend for any of that stuff. That's just stuff you're making up. There's no director in his right mind that sits there with these textured tapestry of all of these hidden aesthetic meanings in films. They have no time, will, or spirit for any of that. When you're on set in that, you are just trying to make it to the end of the day, and all of that post-criticism and analysis is completely made up. Now, some of it's good, some of it's very insightful. Even when you were speaking about Night of the Living Dead, and they had a black dude in the lead, and that you made up and the press made up because Dwayne Jones, the lead, was just the best guy for the job. It had nothing to do with the color, but given the time of the social unrest in the 60s and all of these revolutionary genres happened within the American terrain, the press created that metaphor. The filmmakers, they may have noticed, it's a black dude leading as a lead protagonist, but they never meant him to be that. Never meant that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever see the documentary Birth? I think it's called Birth of the Living Dead. I just seen Roy Frumkis had to write about a document of the dead. So Birth of the Living Dead I've yet to see. Yeah, I see a lot of documentaries. And
I've yet to see that.
Go back to your point about Jones. You're absolutely right about psychoanalyzing things to death. They just had people audition for the film, and he nailed it. And so they without a second thought, they didn't care. They just thought this is our lead, this is him, and they didn't care about all that other bull crap. They just wanted the best guy for the job. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying about that. Absolutely.
Yes. However, like going back to Coven, my one substantial metaphor, again, what I was saying is that this was about the individual taking control over his life and disallowing the collective to hoodwink him. But any other metaphor that you read into it, it would be completely 100% made up, because you read about your own film, say, oh, well, this is all just made up. The filmmaker had no intention of it. Now, before we get to modus operandi and Hagstone Demon, I do want to point out a couple things in COVID, because our subconscious is more powerful than our conscious. And as a kid or something like that, you don't buy into it. But as a learned adult, you begin to realize the implications of your formative years and the great hold that it has on you throughout the entirety of your life. So I noticed a couple things that I never mentioned before about Coven, and all of a sudden I said, oh my God, did my subconscious pick up on something? In Coven, when the muscle car in Teleforto comes over the hill, you can see that same shot in Phantasm. When they're dollying around the group members in Coven, you can see that in David Cronenberg's Scanners, that same shot. And I'm thinking, oh my God, did my subconscious do that to me and pick up on that and get embedded in my mind and I didn't even know it? So if you watch Scanners and you watch Phantasm, you can see corollary shots in Coven as well, which I never intended to do, but I think my subconscious was embedded with those.
That's great, man.
Particular themes.
And to jump back to the to kind of the the parallel with music, it'd be like a jazz musician who's heard a record by John Coltrane 100 times, and he's playing some solo, and he doesn't mean to sample or play maybe a lick that John played on a solo or something like that, or whoever it is, or maybe But all of a sudden, like you said, something creeps into your subconscious, and then you put it out, and then maybe you listen to yourself, like a recording, and you're like, whoa, did I just quote somebody else's work, and it totally it seeps in from your influences. So
you're absolutely right. It is a legitimate response, because all you do in life is, whether you believe it. I mean, it is determinism, and you are reacting to all of these events, and as you say, it seeps in, and so on and so forth. So there are people that blatantly, their whole life is blatantly ripping off music, and I'm not talking about sampling, but they're taking riffs, or they're taking scenes, or there's professional people that do it, and there's other people, a few who it would be aghast at having one note or one frame of someone else in their work, but subconsciously, unavoidably, those things slip in.
Yeah, good
point. That you have no control over.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally dig that. So, Modus Operandi and Hagstone Demon, those are two things. Now, in Hagstone, in Modus, you had a supporting role, and in Hagstone, you are the lead. Do you have some more work in front of the camera? Or do you have some things that maybe you don't have to, let us in on everything that's in your life? But I just wondered if there's something else, coming down the road that we can kind of, something you're writing. I don't know if there's something that you're a project you might want to plug, or talk about, like, what kind of creative process you're into now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for that, we're talking about 5, 6, 7, a billion different things. Just to jump ahead, first of all, Frankie Latina is the director, the creator of Modus Operandi. He shot that in Milwaukee, and he shot it on Super 8. And from Super 8, it got picked up by Kino Lorber and distributed it. So that was amazing. Frankie undoubtedly is a visionary, and he just loves 60s and 70s cinema, and really,
you can tell it's beautiful.
Yeah, he just loves the compositions, just loves the colors. Now I do too. I mean, that's not the parent in Coven, but some of my other work up and coming will reflect that same sensibility. Now, to jump really quickly ahead, Frankie is finishing his second feature, and initially it was called Snapshot. Now it's called Columbia, but it also has Danny Trejo in it. So Danny Trejo has returned again in Frankie Latina's film Columbia, otherwise known as Snapshot. And I can't mention them, but there's some other Hollywood luminaries in there too, and I have a part as well. And so it's actually I don't know how secretive or how known, but with Frankie's film, but I'm doing to do some other work on it too, and I'm trying not to see the whole thing. It's shot on Super 16, and the compositions are just fantastic. It's one of those films that's just a delight to look at from beginning to end.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Modus Operandi. So if you got something else, and he's got Snapshot, what was the other working title you said, or the other?
Columbia. Yeah.
Nice.
And I'll tell you, it is. If you like Modus Operandi, you're really going to like this. So there's no software jinx involved. It's something really cool. It's this time it's in Super 16, and it's a different film, and it really works. And I'm so happy and proud with what Frankie has accomplished. And the music is funky 70s. The compositions and colors are funky 70s. So it's just great stuff.
Do you get killed in this one?
I believe I do. I'm just trying to think, is the dude still breathing after that? but yeah, I would say, based upon what I saw, I believe so.
Beautiful. Because in case you haven't seen it, dear listeners, you need to check out Mark's. It's a spoiler, but we give away spoilers here. We're not going to give away the whole movie. But Mark's got a very creative demise in Modus Operandi, and I was like, oh, this is great. I really enjoyed that. Hank Stone, you were the lead. Do you?
Yeah.
I really thought that was a pretty clever movie. I like the whole thing. The the building's going to be torn down, and I just thought it just had some great shots, and then I enjoyed it. Do you have some? Do you have the itch to maybe work behind the camera again? Anything like that, Colin?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. First of all. Again, now this is a whole complicated thing because now you've also involved. We can run a little bit more time if you like. 'Cause I want to explain this before I explain about me getting behind the camera. I want to go to Hagstone Demon for a second.
You got it, man.
We have time.
Oh, you got it, man. Yeah, anything for you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hagstone Demon and Modus Operandi cannot be more different. In the filmmakers that made them and in the way that those films were done, cannot be more different. John Springer directed and co-wrote The Hagstone Demon. John Springer is a commercial filmmaker. He shot around 700 commercials by the time that I knew him, and some short films. He is the consummate workaholic to the nth degree. That's all he does is film and work, and he's inadvertently, now besides raising his children with his wife, which is also a full-time job, that he devoted his life to filmmaking, and I mean, so he is really given his all to that. Now, Frankie has as well, but it's a completely different lifestyle. Now, Modus Operandi, I think, was shot over years, intermittently, whereas the Hagstone Demon was concretely shot, I think, within the span of like 3 weeks.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, it was completely different situation. And we shot it in Minneapolis. It's a 6-hour drive. I cut northwest across Wisconsin. And the co-writer was Harrison Matthews. Harrison is written for the theater. He co-wrote The Hagstone Demon. He plays some music, so I stayed at his place. And it was a good time, and we got to meet people. And there were incidents like just many things, but like there was a scene where there's these witchers or whatever, these members of a cult out in the farmland with the circling of fire. And what amazed me, we were in the Black Night in Minnesota with these half-naked people, I think, and in a bonfire.
Right.
And there's a small plane flying overhead. And as they looked down, in their mind, they must have been freaking out because they had no idea it was a film. So forever now, they've told everyone that they flew over a satanic cult.
Yeah, right. They're calling the FBI to have you investigated.
Yeah, so they literally, those people in that small plane, forevermore, they have this bizarre, chilling incident now.
Yeah,
that they got to deal with.
They're praying for your soul for sure, man.
Yeah, when we did Coven at the drive-in with the same thing with those guys in the robes surrounding the car. Years later, I encountered a few people who said, I was driving on the freeway, man. I saw that. We freaked. We saw this cult in black robes at the drive-in. And so they didn't know it was a film.
Jeez.
So they have that memory, too, of seeing that, as did dozens of passerbys.
That's hilarious. That is a great story.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the itch,
yeah.
the itch for maybe working behind the camera. Is that something you think might be coming up in the future, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Actually, after Coven, I shot a bunch of various films, and I'm just so into filming and composition, and I don't like to sit in front of screens, and I won't let anyone touch a frame of my film, so they just remained unedited, as bizarrely as that sounds. Now, what inspires me about film is realistic dialogue. So that doesn't mean the clever repartee of Hollywood dialogue, even though I write that in play form. But I'm more of a person that comes out of the 60s and 70s experimental filmmaking, where they would incorporate real life, such as Norman Mailer's Maidstone and William Greaves' Symbiocytotoxoplasm, Take One, or L.M. Kit Carson's The American Dreamer, and David Holzman's Diary, or Robert Downey Sr.'s Putney Swope, and all of that stuff. And I was high. That's my era. Those are my kind of films. And even in a Hollywood way, we can go to '66 to John Frankenheimer's Seconds, which has some great, marvelous stuff in that. So when I think about behind the camera, I have to be inspired by wide-angle lens and by montage and by things like that. I'm not inspired. I don't care about story. If I want to watch story, I'll read John Updike and John Cheever and Henry James and Raymond Carver and Joan Didion and stuff like that. Well, she's more of an essayist, but play it as it lays. But anyway, so I'm even though now I do study story, I've written many scripts and all kinds of stuff, and so film to me is inspired by aesthetic elements and not narrative elements. I think, oh my God, the fakest thing I had to do is come up with a story. I have zero interest in it, and so yeah, as God willing, and the creek don't rise, you will see some films from me, and I am going to get in front of the editing this year and start putting them together and so forth. You can actually see a very, very, very short poem film of mine on the Lunchbox film series, as long as they put that in their anthology. But it's a short film poem, but it's that would be something. But anyway, yeah, for narrative films and all of that, yeah, you can expect to see something. Definitely, I've already shot some. They got to be put together, and I am getting excited to do more because I've spent the last 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 17 years or so writing and so forth. I have an arsenal of intellectual property, and actually what's really funny is, I'm writing and doing projects all the time. I actually, out of the blue, wrote and performed this country tune today with Milwaukee, Los Angeles. They were recording that or whatever, and it's just, I've done so many crazy, not crazy stuff, but stuff that I'm pretty damn proud of with mutual benefit with other people, based on the imagination and the work ethic where all of this stuff comes through, So, we just did a spot for Film Freeway, a mini film for them, that I wrote and directed, and we shot over a few days, and they're the conduit to all the film festivals, including horror and screenplays, so you can also see a 2-3 minute piece from me there from that as well.
Awesome. Mark, that's music to my ears, because I'm glad to hear that. I've enjoyed watching you on the screen in various roles and things that you've done and been a part of, and it's good to hear that you're a creative guy. It's obvious to anybody listening that you're a creative guy. You strike a nerve with people. You're incredibly likable. You're just a good soul, and I really thank you for your time that you've given to the Necronomicast tonight. Is there a way, I don't know if you have when these things come out, are you going to have a website that was something that we can link to, or, how are you going to get the information to the people?
Yeah. Well, I will. If I was going to say, if I may be so bold, you can follow me at More the Scarier. On that T-word stuff that you can say, but
yeah, really, like all the little birds.
No, yeah. Well, you do, yeah, exactly. So it's at More the Scarier. One thing is that it's that internet stuff it's just, and I don't mean to be a cliche, but I just don't get into it. So I mean, all of that's how so when people this, that, the other thing, it's I'll put that stuff on the T-word and have some fun with it, but I'm more like a person that gets the Friday and Sunday New York Times, spends the week going through the Sunday Review, business section, the arts section, the book review. I have thousands of books. I do not watch TV in any way, shape, or form except for like the Packers and the Academy Awards, for which for some reason I haven't missed since 1988 now.
Yeah.
So I may as well not break that spell. So I'm not like the 99%. I don't watch TV. I don't have no interest in the internet, even though I do a little bit of it. It's only business on the internet for that stuff. And
right.
But yeah, so it's not in being an ideologue or anything. I've never really got into TV. I've never got into movies. I've always studied film, but I go to the movie for entertainment is actually unthinkable. I can't intellectually connect to that idea, but to watch films, to study films, absolutely.
Nice. Well, we'll make sure that any news that we hear from you on that at More the Scarier, we'll make sure to let the people that enjoyed this interview know about it so they can continue to follow your career. I had the pleasure to interview and talk to and really listen to and just had a great time with Mark Borchardt up there in Wisconsin. Go Packers. Mark, I really thank you for your time. You are an American original, and it's been great having you on the show tonight.
Go Packers, and thank you so much, Brian, for having me, and be good and continue to have a very good, prosperous life. And thank you for allowing me to get on the air with you.
Absolutely, my man. Hey, stay on the line after we sign off, and we'll chat just for a second or two. But everybody, thanks for listening. Yeah, thanks, Mark. Everybody, thanks for listening to the Necronomicast. And on behalf of our hosts, Wayne and Zip, Lori and Doug, this is Brian, and thank you for coming down the dark alley.
You've been listening to the Necronomicast, a part of the Free Life Media Network. For show notes, blogs, merchandise, and other information, go to our show page at necronomicast.net. And don't forget to find us on Facebook so we can be social all up in ya.